Tonight, in this deep dive, you are sitting at a crowded restaurant table.
Right, the plates are cleared.
Yeah, and the ambient noise of laughter and, clinking glasses surrounds you. And then the leather folio holding the bill is placed gently in the center of the table.
Just sitting there.
Exactly. It sits there like a quiet, unexploded grenade with the receipt inside. You experience that almost invisible moment of reaching for your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
You pull out your card, not out of a sudden burst of joyful generosity, but out of a subtle, heavy sense of obligation.
Yeah, it is a profound, silent weight. And it is a dynamic that plays out in millions of relationships every single day.
Oh, absolutely.
So we are exploring the hidden architecture of financial generosity, financial enabling, and the boundaries we draw or, consistently fail to draw with family and friends.
Which is such a massive topic.
It really is. We are pulling from a highly layered stack of sources today. We've got behavioral science research, family systems theory, financial planning case studies, and some truly fascinating psychological insights.
And our mission here is to gently untangle why we give. What happens when giving hurts both the giver and the receiver, and how to understand our own behavior with deep compassion.
Because it really requires compassion.
It does. If you have ever felt that quiet, sour resentment after covering a bill or sending a money transfer to someone you love, you are in a safe, non-judgmental space today. We are exploring a very private discomfort.
We have to look at the mechanisms beneath money because, as the research continually points out, well, the money is rarely just about the money.
Right. So let's step fully into that human picture. I mean, we have all been in a version of that restaurant scene.
Oh, yeah. Every single one of us.
You're at dinner with friends, the bill arrives, maybe because of past conversations or just an intuitive read of the room that your friends might struggle to split it.
Or perhaps there's just this unspoken expectation hanging in the air.
Yes, because you are perceived as a successful one, right?
Yeah.
And without thinking, almost like muscle memory, you slide your card into the leather folio and say, I've got it.
Or, perhaps it takes a completely different form happening in the quiet of your own living room.
Like what?
Like a text message from an adult child asking for help with rent. Again. Or a sibling needing a quote-unquote bridge loan that, historically will never be repaid.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The context changes, the cast of characters changes, but the internal mechanism driving your response, it's identical.
And the internal experience is so visceral. If you pay attention to your body in that exact second, the second the text comes in or the second the bill lands on the table, there's a slight tightening in your chest.
Mm-hmm. That immediate physical reaction.
Right, a momentary holding of the breath, your nervous system is reacting, and then there's the immediate drop in anxiety once the money is sent or the card is run.
The tension just releases. You can breathe again.
Exactly. But then, hours later, maybe when you are driving home or, I don't know, brushing your teeth in the dark, there is a quiet, lingering resentment.
Which is the hardest part to deal with.
It is. And we immediately try to push that resentment away. We police our own feelings, telling ourselves we are terrible people for feeling resentful about helping someone we love.
And that cycle is incredibly common. But it is vital to understand that it is a physiological and emotional loop, not a moral failure.
What's loop?
Right. You are responding to a perceived threat. The threat of social friction, the threat of disappointing someone, or the terrifying threat of seeing someone you deeply care about in distress.
So sending the money just neutralizes that immediate threat.
Exactly. Your nervous system calms down. But the logical, self-protective part of your brain catches up hours later and, well, it recognizes the imbalance.
We treat it like a financial transaction, but it feels more like an emotional ransom. I mean, long before the money ever leaves our bank accounts, we are paying a heavy emotional tax.
An emotional tax, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, we're paying in the form of guilt, fear of conflict, or the absolute dread of letting someone down. We are handing over cash, but the real currency being drained is our emotional energy.
And that emotional tax is the invisible toll of navigating relationships where financial boundaries are blurred. And what the behavioral science reveals is that this isn't just a matter of being too nice.
Or having weak willpower, right?
Exactly. There is a precise vocabulary in psychology for this specific pattern of behavior, which fundamentally changes how we view our own actions.
So let's name it. Because walking around thinking you are just a resentful pushover is an awful way to live. But the sources define two interconnected concepts here that completely reframe the picture.
Which are compulsive financial giving and financial enabling.
Let's break those down, starting with compulsive financial giving.
Well, on the surface, it looks like extreme generosity, but the underlying engine is completely different. Compulsive giving is generosity driven not by free choice, but by an internal compulsion to ease discomfort, anxiety, or the fear of abandonment.
So the giving isn't actually the goal at all.
No, not at all the
The
goal.
giving is basically the tool used to medicate the anxiety.
Yes, and that naturally bleeds into the second concept, which is financial enabling.
Right.
This is a cyclical relationship where a provider continually yields resources to a dependent. The critical element here is the unintended consequence.
Which is what, exactly?
Well, by continually yielding those resources, the provider unintentionally limits the dependent's personal development and actively reinforces unhealthy behavior.
Wow. When I was reading through these definitions and the sources, it was a massive light bulb moment for me.
I can imagine. It is for a lot of people.
Because when you cover a friend's rent or pay for the entire group vacation, it might look like a love language on the outside. It looks like you're just being incredibly sweet and taking care of your tribe.
Right, that's the narrative we tell ourselves.
But if it is masking a deeper anxiety about your worth in the relationship, or if you are secretly terrified they won't want to be around you if you stop paying it, is compulsive giving.
Exactly.
You aren't just being generous, you are regulating your own anxiety.
And that realization alone can shift the entire foundation of a relationship. Generosity, by its very definition, is a free offering. Compulsion is a hostage situation within your own mind.
That's such a stark contrast.
It is. When you operate from compulsion, you are paying a toll to maintain your own emotional equilibrium.
But the line between those two things feels incredibly blurry in real life. I mean, how do we know the difference?
It's tough, yeah.
How do we know the difference between just being a good, generous person who has had some success and genuinely wants to share it, and someone who is trapped in compulsive giving?
The litmus test is profoundly simple, though deeply confronting. It's determined entirely by what happens when you try to say no.
Yep.
If saying no feels emotionally unsafe, if the very thought of declining the request causes a spike in panic, a wave of guilt, or a deep physical fear that the relationship will fracture, then it is a compulsion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. True generosity does not punish you internally for withholding it. If you are truly free to say yes, you must also be free to say no without suffering an emotional penalty.
That is heavy. If saying no feels emotionally unsafe, it's a compulsion.
It really reframes everything.
It does. If that realization that you might be medicating your own anxiety just hit you in the chest, let's take a breath. That discomfort, that quiet recognition, is exactly why we're having this conversation.
And before we get into the science of why this happens, we want to gently invite you to subscribe to Leone Patterns and leave a comment.
Yes, absolutely.
This is a way to join a community of people who are thoughtfully exploring the human side of money. We want to ensure you never miss a deep dive into these quiet patterns.
So if we understand that this giving is often just a compulsion, the terrifying question becomes, why is our nervous system reacting to a friend's unpaid rent or a family member's financial crisis as if it is a mortal threat to our own safety?
Right. What exactly broke in our conditioning?
What broke?
Well, to answer that, we have to pull from Dr. Bradley Clounce's research on disordered money behaviors. He points to a fundamental principle of human behavioral science, which is operant conditioning.
Okay, let's bypass the textbook definition, though. How does operant conditioning actually hijack a relationship involving money?
Well, think of money as one of the most powerful, immediate reinforcers in human existence.
Okay.
Let's look at the dynamic between a parent and an adult child. If the dependent party complains, pleads, uses a calculated guilt trip, or creates a crisis, and that behavior is ultimately rewarded with a cash transfer, the brain learns a very simple lesson.
And what does it learn?
The dependent's brain learns that this pleading action yields this financial reward. It is essentially pulling the lever on a slot machine that always eventually pays out.
But the giver is being conditioned too, right? They aren't just a passive ATM.
Oh, absolutely. The giver is arguably being conditioned more severely. The giving acts as a rapid-acting salve for the giver's anxiety.
Right.
When the pleading stops or the dependent's immediate crisis is averted, the giver's distress instantly evaporates. So the giving behavior is negatively reinforced.
Wait, negative reinforcement?
Yes, meaning a negative stimulus. The unbearable anxiety of seeing a loved one in pain or being angry with you is removed by the act of giving.
Oh, I see.
It creates a powerful, locked reinforcement loop for both parties. The dependent learns that distress equals cash. The provider learns that cash equals momentary peace.
I was reading through Murray Bowen's family systems theory in the sources,
Hmm.
and it just stopped me in my tracks because it takes us out of the individual brain and looks at the whole family structure.
Bowen's work is brilliant for this.
I got stuck on this idea of triangulation because on the surface, a parent continually paying their 30-year-old's rent looks like extreme helicopter parenting. But Bowen suggests something much darker.
Darker and honestly much more complex.
It almost sounds like a married couple might use their financially dependent kid as a shield so they don't have to look at each other's flaws. Am I misinterpreting that?
No, you are hitting the exact nerve of the theory. It's not conscious manipulation. The parents aren't plotting this over morning coffee.
Where they aren't trying to be malicious.
Exactly. But subconsciously, the family system demands stability. Imagine a dyad, a married couple, where the intimacy has evaporated. There is a terrifying unspoken distance between them.
Which is a really painful place to be.
Very. If they look at each other, they have to face the fact that the marriage is failing. The anxiety of that realization is intolerable.
So what do? How does the money factor in?
They introduce a third point to the line, creating a triangle. That third point is usually a child in crisis. Suddenly, all that ambient marital anxiety is funneled into a highly acceptable, distracting project rescuing the adult son who just lost his job again.
Wow.
The mother overfunctions for the son, constantly sending him money. The father complains about the mother's spending on the son, and suddenly they are communicating again.
They have a shared enemy, basically, or a shared project.
Exactly, a shared distress. The son's financial dependency literally stabilizes the parents' marriage by giving them a buffer.
So the son is basically the structural load-bearing pillar of their dysfunction. And the money is just the mortar keeping him in place.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Because if he gets a great job, becomes financially independent, and moves out, the parents are suddenly alone in a quiet house, staring at a stranger.
And that is the tragedy of it. The system will actually resist the son's independence. If he tries to refuse the money or establish autonomy, the family system will subtly sabotage him or guilt him.
Because his financial independence threatens the parents' equilibrium.
Yes. Bowen also ties this to the concept of the differentiation of self.
Meaning the ability to be close to your family without entirely losing your own identity.
Precisely. A person who lacks that differentiation is considered fused. They cannot emotionally separate from their family system.
Okay.
What we see in the research is that financial support is often used subconsciously by parents to keep an adult child fused to the family system. It acts as an invisible tether, preventing true, frightening independence.
Let me push back on this for a second, though.
Yeah.
If we look at this from a purely evolutionary standpoint, aren't we hardwired to just help our offspring survive?
Oh, sure.
Isn't it just altruism? If I have resources and my child is struggling, I want them to live and thrive. Calling it a subconscious attempt to keep them fused feels a little cynical, honestly.
I get that. That biological instinct to protect is absolutely real.
Yeah.
But social exchange theory counters that pure, unadulterated altruism is incredibly rare in complex adult dynamics.
Really?
Yeah. Social exchange theory suggests that sometimes giving is an unconscious trade. We provide money, and in return, we expect something very specific.
Like what?
We expect closeness, we expect loyalty, we expect deference to our opinions, or we expect non-monetary care later in life. We're essentially buying emotional insurance.
So when a mother pays her daughter's medical bill, she's secretly just buying emotional insurance. That feels unfair to the parents out there who are just trying to help their kids stay afloat in a terrible economy.
It is not about villainizing the parent at all. The intent is almost always rooted in love. The theory merely points out that when the money flows, expectations silently travel alongside it.
The strings attached.
Right. If a parent pays a down payment on a house, and the adult child then stops visiting for Sunday dinners, the parent often feels deeply betrayed. Why?
Because the subconscious contract was violated.
Exactly. The parent didn't just buy a house, they bought continued access to the child.
And if we look at how the child learns this dynamic, the childhood attachment research from 2019 in our sources is eye-opening. It shows how we learn these currencies of love in the very beginning.
It is so foundational.
If a child grows up in an environment where they learn that love, safety, or attention is contingent on being useful, caretaking, or sacrificing their own needs, they internalize a very dangerous message.
They grow up believing, I'm valuable only when I provide.
Yes.
For that child, who is now an adult, money becomes their most reliable currency for securing closeness. If they stop providing, they genuinely fear they will lose their belonging in the tribe.
It sounds like we are treating money as an emotional anesthetic. We're handing over cash to numb the pain of a deeper relationship issue or an old childhood wound.
We really are.
We use it to numb the fear of abandonment. But the anesthetic always wears off. The
Hmm.
money gets spent, the underlying wound is still there, and the nervous system demands another dose.
The tolerance builds, the doses must increase, and the underlying condition is completely unaddressed. And this brings us to how these invisible psychological mechanisms actually live and breathe in our daily lives.
The actual patterns.
Yes, the specific patterns people fall into, often completely without noticing.
Let's explore those patterns, because moving from theory to reality is where this gets uncomfortable. The first pattern, identified in the Journal of Financial Therapy, distinguishes between two types of parental support.
The scaffolding pattern versus the safety net pattern.
Yes, this distinction is crucial for understanding when financial health is actually helpful and when it becomes toxic.
Scaffolding is temporary, targeted support designed to build human capital. The classic example is a parent paying for a child's college education or a vocational certification.
Or even covering living expenses for 3 months while they do an unpaid internship.
Right. And the research shows this works beautifully. It provides the structure for the child to build their own independent earning power. Once the building is stable, the scaffolding is removed.
It works because the scaffolding inherently has an end date. You don't leave scaffolding on a building forever,
Exactly.
but a safety net operates under a totally different philosophy.
A safety net is indefinite support that catches the person whenever they fall, but doesn't necessarily demand or improve their long-term economic attainment.
It's paying the rent month after month.
Or covering credit card bills when they overspend, or paying for a lifestyle the dependent simply cannot sustain on their own. The data from the sources shows that parents across all socioeconomic levels are currently giving about 10% of their income to adult children.
10% of their income. That is staggering, especially considering how many people are behind on their own retirement savings.
It is staggering, and when that 10% is purely safety net funding, it actively stunts the transition to adulthood. The dependent never learns the crucial life skill of recovering from failure.
And this isn't just a parent-child issue. There's a whole other pattern that happens between peers. The social asymmetry pattern. We see this heavily in the Bread Financial study.
Oh, the social pressure to keep up is immense. 65% of Gen Z and 59% of millennials report breaking their budgets for social activities.
Just going out to eat, trips, birthdays, concerts.
Right.
And the really shocking statistic from that study, 30% of people admit they have never repaid friends who lent them money. 30%.
It's a huge...
We all have that one friend where you Venmo request them, and it just vanishes into the void.
Mhm.
Over time, you just stop asking.
And when one friend is habitually the payer or the lender who is never repaid, it fundamentally alters the architecture of the friendship. It creates what researchers call moral leverage.
Moral leverage.
Yeah, there becomes an implicit expectation of gratitude or deference from the person receiving the money. The friendship slowly metastasizes into a transaction. The giver starts to feel resentful and used, and the receiver starts to feel infantilized, defensive, and strangely trapped.
The relationship shifts from genuine intimacy and mutual vulnerability to simply access. They're hanging around for the access to the provision, not for the person. That is heartbreaking. You're no longer a friend, you're an underwriter.
It is heartbreaking. And if we look at the dependent side of the equation, whether it's the friend constantly being treated or the adult child living on an allowance, we see another pattern. Dr. Klontz refers to it as the curse of too many options.
I found this part of the research so counterintuitive. You would think that if someone gave you unlimited financial support, you would have the ultimate freedom to become the best version of yourself.
That's what we assume, yes.
You could write the great American novel, start the visionary business, figure out your true passion. Why is it so hard for the dependent to just get their act together when they have all this support? You'd think a safety net would make them thrive. Instead, they end up funding their fourth master's degree in left-handed puppetry because they're terrified of getting a 9-to-5.
It is a paradox of human development, really. Unlimited financial support without expectation actually robs a person of the structural friction necessary for psychological growth.
The friction.
Yes. Work, even a job you don't particularly love, provides built-in social interactions, concrete goals, challenges, rules, and vital feedback mechanisms.
It forces you to delay gratification. You have to tolerate a boss you don't like to get a paycheck you need.
Exactly. It builds resilience. With unstructured free time and unlimited options, the dependent often becomes immobilized. They suffer from paralysis by analysis.
Because they can do anything, so they do nothing.
Right. Because there is no urgent biological need to survive. The rent is paid, the fridge is full. There is no pressure to commit to anything difficult. So they move from degree to degree or job to job, quitting at the very first sign of interpersonal conflict or boredom.
Wow.
Being rescued constantly prevents the dependent from developing self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy being the core belief that you are capable of handling your own life.
Yes, they never get to prove to themselves that they can handle a crisis. And that leads to a profound, quiet depression.
Really?
Yes, the dependent often feels a deep, rotting sense of inadequacy, masked by the comfortable lifestyle provided by the enabler. They know, deep down, they are a fraud in their own life.
Man. And then there's the pattern where things turn explicitly dark.
Hmm.
The red flags pattern, identified by the NetBank behavioral markers of financial abuse.
This is when the dynamic has crossed from unhealthy, well-intentioned enabling into actual exploitation.
And the markers are pretty clear.
It's very clear. The red flags are undeniable friends or family members who only call when they are cash-strapped. People who use elaborate lies or severe guilt trips to manipulate the giver.
Right.
Or, very commonly, they refuse to say what the money is actually for. If you ask for details, they become instantly defensive and accuse you of not trusting them.
They hit you with the classic, if you really loved me, you wouldn't interrogate me.
Exactly. It weaponizes the emotional bond against the provider. It uses the giver's love as a blunt instrument to extract resources.
We have laid out the heavy science.
Yeah.
We have laid out the patterns that operate in the shadows of our friendships and families. And this is where we have to fundamentally shift the conversation.
Yes.
This is the core reframe of our deep dive.
This is the most crucial step we will take today. We have to move completely away from shame.
If you are listening to this and recognizing yourself, if you are realizing you are a financial enabler or a compulsive giver, we want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak.
You are not a failure.
You are not a fool who is just being taken advantage of.
You are engaging in a deeply human behavior designed to protect the people you love and to secure your own place in their lives. You give because you care.
Yeah.
You give because the idea of your child, your sibling, or your friend suffering is genuinely intolerable to your nervous system. The behavior makes complete human sense.
You are trying to solve a complex emotional problem with a financial tool. It's the wrong tool, but the intention is love. The intention is safety.
Understanding the enabler's dilemma is about recognizing that your generosity comes from a good place, but it has simply lost its boundaries, and that requires us to completely redefine what a boundary actually is, because the cultural definition is flawed.
Dr. Megan Lertz, an expert in financial psychology, has this brilliant analogy in the source material. We usually think of boundaries as these hostile electrified walls.
Right, like a fortress.
We think we're building a fortress to control other people, to punish them, or to keep them out. But she says a boundary is not a wall. A boundary is just a playpen.
It is a beautiful reframe. Think about a literal playpen. It defines a safe space. It doesn't control the baby inside. It doesn't force the baby to play with a specific toy.
No, it just says, here are the limits of the safe area where you can play and explore without getting hurt.
Exactly. A boundary in a relationship defines the safe space where the relationship can actually thrive without building resentment.
It offers the other person a choice to respect the limit, rather than handing them an ultimatum or a threat.
Because a threat is very different.
A threat is, if you don't get a job this week, I'm cutting you off forever. A boundary is, I love you, and I will support your rent for the next 6 months while you look for work. After 6 months, my financial contribution will stop, regardless of the outcome.
The boundary provides clarity. It removes the paralyzing anxiety of the unknown for both parties. And to borrow another brilliant analogy from the recovery space, specifically, the Sandra Project financial boundaries are like seatbelts.
I love this one. They don't restrict you, they protect you.
When you put on a seatbelt, you aren't trying to punish the driver. You aren't restricting your own freedom to travel. You are securing yourself so that you can survive the journey, regardless of what the driver does.
Yeah, it is so powerful.
Saying no to a financial request does not mean you don't love the person asking. It means you are learning to love yourself, too. It means you are putting on your own financial and emotional seatbelt so that the relationship doesn't crash and burn into resentment.
We always think saying yes makes us the good person. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that yes is the kindest, most loving word in the dictionary.
But sometimes saying yes is just the absolute easiest way to avoid our own discomfort in the moment.
Holding a boundary is uncomfortable. It feels awful at first. Your nervous system will scream at you, but it is not unkind.
In fact, it is the highest form of respect. It respects your own limits, and critically, it respects the other person's capability to manage their own life. You are acknowledging that they are a capable adult.
So how do we actually do this in the real world? How do we rip the Band-Aid off gracefully without drowning in shame or starting a family war?
The sources provide some incredibly practical scripts for this.
One of my favorites is using a financial planner or even just your own budget spreadsheet as the bad guy gatekeeper.
It's a highly effective de-escalation technique. When you say, I won't give you the money, it instantly invites an argument about your love, your loyalty, or how much money they think you have.
But if you say, my financial advisor has reviewed my long-term plan and they have strictly advised me that I cannot make any outside financial transfers right now.
Or, I have committed to a strict budget for my own financial recovery, and this simply doesn't fit in.
You completely remove the personal rejection from the equation. The answer is just a structural reality.
Right. And learning to simply say, I can't take this on right now without over-explaining.
Oh, over-explaining is the trap we all fall into. It just gives the other person ammunition to negotiate with you. Oh, you can't afford my rent because of your car repair. I'll pay you back before your mechanic bill is due.
Over-explaining invites a debate. A boundary is a statement of fact, not a negotiation. You have the fundamental right to simply state your limit without having to justify it to a jury.
And as you practice these scripts, the goal is for you to feel a deep, grounding truth. I am not broken. I am human, and I have the power to change this.
Which pulls this entire idea upward. If we look at the deeper connection here, we realize that money is never just about money.
It really isn't.
It is a tangible proxy for our deepest psychological needs. It is a stand-in for safety, for recognition, and for belonging.
When we fund someone else's life indefinitely, we are often secretly trying to control the uncontrollable. We want to guarantee that they won't experience the pain of failure because their pain causes us pain.
Or, on a darker, quieter level, we want to guarantee that they won't leave us. We think our money makes us indispensable.
It is the ultimate illusion of control. But you cannot buy someone's self-esteem for them, and you cannot purchase a genuine, unconditional connection.
No, true connection requires mutual vulnerability. It requires two people standing on their own 2 feet, choosing to be together, not one person leaning entirely on the other's wallet.
That is why setting a financial boundary is, honestly, heroic. It breaks a family pattern.
It does.
It might be a pattern that has lasted for generations, where love was always transactional, where control was always maintained through the purse strings, where anxiety was always medicated with cash.
By setting a boundary, you model an entirely new way forward for your children, for your friends, and for your community.
You are tolerating the short-term sadness, the acute discomfort, and the heavy guilt of saying no. And by enduring that discomfort, you are prioritizing a relationship based on authenticity rather than a relationship based on a financial IV drip.
Consider the relationships in your life right now where money is freely flowing. What if the most deeply generous, loving thing you could do for that person isn't to pay their way, but to step back and let them feel the true, magnificent weight of their own life?
It is a profound shift in perspective, to trust them enough to let them carry their own weight, to believe that they are strong enough to survive their own failures.
We have covered so much ground today.
We really have. We started by looking at that quiet, heavy moment of reaching for the wallet at the restaurant table.
We explored the psychology of how the compulsion to give is often just an emotional regulator for our own anxiety, a way to negatively reinforce our own fears away.
We saw how this plays out in families and friendships, creating asymmetry, moral leverage, and a paralyzing dependence that traps the people we love in the curse of too many options.
And we completely reframed the entire dynamic. Setting a boundary is not an act of hostility. It is a playpen. It is a seatbelt.
It is an act of deep love for both yourself and the other person, designed to foster true self-efficacy and genuine human connection.
If this conversation felt true for you,
If something in here landed, we would love for you to subscribe to Leone Patterns so you never miss what we explore next.
leave a comment and tell us, what did this bring up for you? We read every single one.
We are building a community here, people who think about money differently, not as a number to chase, but as a human experience to understand.
You are not alone in this, and we are genuinely glad you are here at Leone Patterns.
Same pace, same questions. See you then.